So I'm here to talk to you about how to work local bureaucracy when building a fundable business for the global market. But before I do that, because that sounds pretty ominous, I'd like to take you on a short journey through the last 8 years of my entrepreneurship experience and hopefully put some perspective on how we get to this. So in 2007, I founded a startup in Lebanon. And I was very excited about it. We were getting some traction. And we got the attention of Kleiner Perkins in the Valley. And we managed to connect with Chiwa Chen back then, who gave us a Skype audience, and we were able to pitch to him. And after the pitch, he looked at us and he said, "Are you ready to relocate to the Valley?" And to be honest, I don't know how many Turks are here, but for me, home is very important, okay? If I'm gonna go to the Valley and I'm going to leave my home for 10 years, I'm gonna have to make the Valley my home. And many people here feel like Turkey is their home, I would imagine, and they would rather be in Turkey than have to leave Turkey to be able to be successful career-wise. So that's where the conversation ended with Kleiner Perkins. And unfortunately, a couple of years later, we wound down OneBox because it was not able to raise Series A. There were very few VCs interested in investing in startups in Lebanon at the time. One of the business developers of OneBox had an idea to create a regional conference, and it was called ArabNet at the time. And he said, "Why don't you help me organize this? I helped you with OneBox, why don't you help me with this?" I'm like, "Sure, why not?" And as we were organizing the first ArabNet in 2010, I came to realize that there's such a thing as a startup ecosystem. What's a startup ecosystem? It's a collection of entrepreneurs, investors, support institutions that come together to create something that is greater than the sum of its parts. However, Lebanon was lacking in that perspective. So I thought, what if I could create a small ecosystem? What if I could create an accelerator? And that accelerator would be like a small ecosystem within the larger fledgling ecosystem, and it could drive things forward and hopefully lead the way. And so I founded Sequence, and Sequence was Lebanon's first accelerator. Now Sequence in 2011 got off to a decent start. We accelerated our first startup, Cinemos, the Netflix of the Arab world. It was relatively successful. It's now valued a few $1 million. And because Lebanon was such a small country, we started thinking, how can we attract a global audience to Lebanon's ecosystem, to our accelerator? So I reached out to my network, and we were able to attract 3 companies, one from Chile, one from Abu Dhabi, and one from Egypt, to set up their operations in Lebanon. They were all startups. And that's when I started realizing maybe Beirut could actually be an international startup hub. Which got us to 2012. 2012 is when I realized, okay, we can attract them, but we also need to turn the ecosystem into a machine. What does that mean? If we only have one acceleration per year, one startup being accelerated per year, and a handful of startups attracted to Lebanon that year, we're not gonna grow. It has to be exponential growth. So what if we could create a machine? What if we could create a program like Y Combinator, like Techstars, that would churn out these startups? And for every 10, one would succeed. And if we churn out 1,000, then the odds are in favor that we're gonna create a decent enough momentum. And so we created Sequence, a Sequence Accelerator program, and the program got 436 applications from 30 countries. We selected 8 startups. Those startups then received $75,000 of investment and started a 6-month acceleration program. Things were just fantastic. Unfortunately, and some of you may remember this, in 2012, the Syrian civil war got really out of hand. It hit full throttle. The whole region started getting affected. Lebanon was tremendously affected. And overnight, we went from a peaceful accelerator program to basically dodging car bombs and assassinations every other week. To put things in perspective, 1 month into the acceleration program, a car bomb was set off 2 kilometers from our accelerator, and 20 people died. Luckily, none of our entrepreneurs. And with that, it was a major car bomb. With that, all confidence in Lebanon as a business destination, startups or not startups, died. We lost 2 investors, 2 major investors. The entire country came to a standstill. And when you're running an accelerator program, the first thing you don't want is environmental risk, because as an accelerator, you have every other type of risk. So you add that environmental risk and you're dead. So we decided, okay, let's just forge ahead, get through the cycle, and then we'll shut down the accelerator. And we did. We forged ahead, graduated 7 of the 8 startups that we had created. And during the demo day, which took place at the largest bank in Lebanon, the central bank got word that there's something that's called a startup, and it's happening, and they invited us to come and pitch to the governor of the central bank. And what was interesting about that is that when we pitched to the governor, he sat through an hour and a half of pitches. I can't sit through an hour and a half of pitches. He didn't bat an eyelid, and then at the end he looked at us and said, I am going to invest in all of these startups. And of course, I don't know if you've ever been around politicians, but they say things and then you walk out and you're like, it's not gonna happen, okay? So 2 weeks later, we get a phone call from the central bank, and the central bank's like, you know, guys, I mean, we'd love to do this, but we can't. We don't have the technical mechanism to do this. However, and it was like one of those but statements that you know, lift your hopes up a bit. However, we've gone ahead and done something maybe a little more interesting. We've gone ahead and created Lebanon's first sovereign fund, designed specifically to invest in startups incorporated in Lebanon. Not Lebanese startups, just startups incorporated in Lebanon. And the size of this fund, $500 million. So we were a bit taken aback because in the last 10 years prior to that point in time, only $10 million were available over 10 years to invest in startups. Overnight, we had just created 500 million. And the first investment from that fund ended up going to one of our startups. Things had finally turned around. With all that wind under our wings, we decided, let's try again and go for the international marketplace. Let's try to turn our gaze to the world because Lebanon is too small for $500 million. And so with the central bank, we organized an international startup conference in Beirut. This took place in November last year. Vitaly was there. A lot of the speakers who you saw on stage here were there. And we pulled in all of our resources and said, let's give this a good shot, because if we do this right, we could get noticed. And we were able to attract 1,600 entrepreneurs, investors, and professionals to come and listen to 53 world-class speakers all the way from Seoul to San Francisco. Like, this was really impressive stuff. To put things in perspective, Le Web, which is one of the largest conferences in Europe, their first time around was 250 people in a room maybe half the size of this. Overnight, Lebanon became an international startup hub. This put us on the map. And when that happened, it felt like we had achieved something. We were on the map, we had made our mark. All that was left was that we remain cohesive as an ecosystem. Yesterday, I received this snapshot from Lebanon. What you're seeing here is an interphone system for a building in downtown Beirut. Every institution in this building, this is not an incubator, this is just a standard building. Every institution is either a startup, an investor, or a support institution in Lebanon's startup ecosystem. All of these people got together, they rented in the same place, and they are working together to keep Lebanon on the map and to keep it moving forward. And a bit of a fun fact, 3 of these 6 institutions I had a hand in one way or the other, so that was actually very fun to see. So, connecting the dots, many of you know this. Steve Jobs once said, it's in hindsight, you can connect the dots looking, in hindsight everything makes sense. You can connect the dots looking forward, but you can never connect them. You can connect the dots, you can't connect the dots looking forward, but you can only connect them looking backwards. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. In the last 8 years, between car bombs, civil wars, every possible thing that could possibly hit the fan, okay, everything was thrown at us. And throughout it, many people just held on to that feeling in their gut and said, listen, we can all leave the country. Most Lebanese have multiple nationalities. But we stuck around, we said, let's make this work. Whatever it takes, we can make this, we can keep this going forward. And eventually all the dots connected, and now we're relevant, which is, I'd say, a good thing. So how does this tie back to the original statement, which was how to work local bureaucracy when building a fundable business for the global market? This is one of the learnings I've acquired over the last 8 years. And to start off this learning, I always take a very large problem, such as this statement, and break it down into smaller parts so that I can tackle it better. How to? Let's deconstruct the part problem, which is the statement, into smaller parts, and reconstruct it into something that makes sense. Work local. Every startup that meets somebody who's been to the Valley or London will be told, you need to be in the Valley or London to succeed. You need to get out of your home and just travel, and that's where you will find success. But unless you're 16 years old or 18 years old and you have no professional experience, your real strength is local. You have roots, you've built contacts, you've built a network, you have some kind of credibility. And that is leverage that you have, that you don't have in Silicon Valley. You're a nobody there. And not only are you a nobody, there are people who are so well connected there that you are fighting the tide. So your strength is where your roots are. Stick around, start there, take advantage of what you have, and then go to another market when you're big enough. Bureaucracy. Bureaucracy, what is it? It's a form of crisis. In Chinese, as was reinforced to me by my Chinese friend who's here with us, in Chinese the word crisis is made up of two characters, danger and opportunity. And this reflects the fact that in every crisis there's an opportunity. So when 20 people died in that car bomb in Beirut when we started the accelerator program, that was a pretty massive crisis. But somehow the teams found an opportunity because the imminent threat to their lives brought them together as teams, as entrepreneurs, and created bonds that if you were in the Valley, you know, with sunny days every day eating, I don't know, tacos, you would never build this bond. You would never feel a threat that would bring you closer to the people around you. And that is an opportunity in that crisis, in that seriously crazy crisis. Now, on this slide, you see what looks like an Italian guy. His name is Mario Berta. He was with us in Cairo a couple of days ago. Mario looked at the crowd, like you guys, and said, how many of you are CEOs? And many people raised their hands because every entrepreneur is a CEO. And then he asked, how many of you are salesmen? And most people, you know, lowered their hands. And Mario looked at them and he's like, those who lowered their hands are not CEOs. And his argument is that CEOs are first and foremost salesmen. And investors are their customers. So you come and tell me, I'm building this product for this market. I understand my customer. I'm building a product because I understand my customer. So why don't you build a business that your investor understands so that they will fund it? Don't try to build a business that nobody in your space can possibly fund because they are not interested. It's counterintuitive. It doesn't mean don't chase after your dreams, but try to understand who your potential investors are and build a business that they are willing to fund. And finally, for the global market. Now this is something that I laugh about a lot because everybody comes and tells me, I want to take over the world. It's like a James Bond story every time. I'm an entrepreneur and we're going to take over the world. But in reality, most successful entrepreneurs are entrepreneurs in their mid-30s, mid-career entrepreneurs, who have identified something while they were at work that was a problem, identified a few key clients that were massive, and delivered a solution to these key clients. So imagine you have only 10 potential customers, but each customer can generate for you a minimum $1 billion of revenue. That's a very, very, very small number of customers, but a very, very, very large upside. And if you are confident that you can get just one, you're a $1 billion company. That's what it is. So size matters, yes, but relative size matters more. And that's all I have to say for today. Thank you. And if you have, I don't know if there's questions.